Let me give you a second. I have blonde eyebrows. They don't show up on screen.
Welcome into Journey to the New Earth. You can tell we've already started the conversation here, chatting away. I'm so glad you're here tonight. This is going to be probably one of the most exciting conversations I've had in a long, long time. I am joined today by Ken Swartz. He is the founder and developer of C60 Power, and of course, the fabulous Penny Kelly. And the conversation this evening is really going to be focused on the whole concept and reality of free energy on the planet. This, of course, is a conversation that we could have had decades ago, but you know, there were forces that decided that wasn't something that they really wanted us to talk about. But I think we're in a position now where we can really go do a bit of a deep dive into finding out what it is, how it could be applied to our civilization, and what it would mean for us in our everyday lives. But first, before I introduce Ken and let him tell a little bit about his background, I just want to do a little promo because he has a company that I'm passionately in love with, and I'm serious about it. He is the creator of C60 Power, which is the C60 I use. It is phenomenal. If you haven't tried C60 and you really want to experience optimal health, I can tell you this is amazing. And ladies, the skincare, the under eye cream, it's the best under eye cream I've ever used, and I've used a lot of them. So if you're interested in giving C60 a try, there's a link in the description box down below, and you can go over and check it out. So this is Ken's baby. He is the genius behind this, but he has also developed what he calls an over parity energy machine. So Ken, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about your background and just a tiny bit about Moxie, and then we'll move on to Penny, and then we'll start the conversation.
Oh, okay. Well, I was a research scientist. I've done a bunch of things, but I've run a couple of research laboratories, and I guess it was I was in the right place with the right people, and we kind of redid a discovery by a couple of Japanese scientists, Osawa and Kushi, in the late 1950s, early 1960s, even before I was born. And they basically were fusing sodium with oxygen to produce potassium. We'll get in more about that later. But their work got suppressed. And so they could never go further because there was no funding, and it kind of got crushed. And I was in the right place with the right people, and we redid their experiments and proved that their experiments actually worked and were valid. And then later, the Scotia group and the University of Valencia redid our experiments, which then double validated Osawa and Kushi. So that's kind of how it started. And that's also actually why I was using, I learned about the health benefits of C60, because that carbon molecule is 60 carbon atoms shaped like little soccer balls, because it's a powerful radiation protectant. Because there was a lot of late PhDs and dead professors associated with this research. And I didn't want my crew or myself to end up on that thing. So, you know, there's a science thing where they gave, one set of rats got C60, the other didn't. They hit them with a fatal dose of radiation. The C60 rats lived while the controls died. And so when I learned about that, I got a couple sources of C60, and I was using an experiment. Even when the experiment was over, I kept using it because I had more mental energy, better focus, and things like that. And then when I went to see my optometrist, my DRUs, or dry macular degeneration, which I'd had for years and was slowly progressing. I was taking the xanthins, the lutins, and all that kind of stuff, right? But it was just it was still slowly progressing. It's pretty common. And it had completely disappeared. And my optometrist was pretty surprised at that because he'd never seen that happen before. And in the meantime, after I learned that, my electrical engineer on the job, Gary Rodriguez, he had developed severe wet macular degeneration because he had type 2 diabetes. So I made a product in MCT oil. And people may know that MCT stands for medium chain triglycerides, and your liver can turn those into ketones. And ketones are like flex fuel for your cells. Your cells can run off ketones, or they can run off glucose. And so it's if you got glucose processing issues, taking MCT oil with or without C60 is a really good idea. And so he's an engineer, he actually records like how long he took to walk the dog every day, right? So
oh my.
So he knew exactly how much he took, and he took basically a tablespoon a day for 15 months, and his severe wet macular degeneration went completely away. We used to post his results. You can see the before and after pictures, the progress, but 3-letter agency said you can't do that. That's a claim. So that disappeared. But oh well.
Yeah, who do you have to bribe?
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, his type 2 diabetes went subclinical.
Wow, that's amazing.
Mm.
Okay, Ken, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I'm really excited about it. Penny, can you tell us a little bit about your background in the field of energy? Probably the work you did with Dr. Levengood.
Yeah, so I started in somewhere around 1996. I think he had reached out to me because he heard that I had some unusual abilities. And at first it was just like we just hit it off right from the start and started talking. And I had 50 million questions. And he liked that. He said, my God, somebody's finally interested in the science. And so it ended up that when he asked me to write about his work, and I said, no. And he finally said, why? I said, because I don't think I can do the science justice. And that's when he said, let me teach you. And so I started into a mentorship with him that went on for like 13 years out of the 15 years that we worked together. And I think probably the greatest compliment that I got from him in all that time, he was telling me something one day, and I said to him, wait a minute. And I asked him, just a series of questions, boom, boom, boom. And he stopped and he said, I can't believe you're not an astrophysicist. And I was like, oh. And I just felt like, ooh, really special from that moment on. And we continued, we were researching consciousness and energy, the things that I could see, things that I didn't know what they were. He had an explanation for, and they were things like quarks and photons and electrons and how electricity behaved. What?
So you can see quarks?
Yeah.
Visually?
Yeah, well, you don't use your visual eyes, but I kept seeing these things, and I thought, what the heck? And over and over and over. And I would also see this like a three-dimensional net. It was like, it reminded me of a sailor's net that you would catch a whale with. Big open squares, but running, horizontally, vertically, and front to back through everything. It was like the whole thing was holding us in place. I've tried to draw
grid.
It's a grid. Yeah. It's an energetic grid. And some of those places where the intersections were places like you would have a sun and things like that. And so I could watch what was going on. And so that's why he was interested in talking to me. And so we continued to work together. We wrote a paper together about charge density plasmas, and wrote another paper about how ETs were, why they were picking up animals and how they were getting the blood out of them and surgically removing parts within 5 minutes and then dumping those animals back on the ground. But we couldn't get that published because no scientists were willing to do a peer review. Everybody said, not touching that with a 10-foot pole. So, so I finally did write about his work, and I understood it finally. And that, just has continued on. Plus, it triggered a lot of memories of what I knew before I came here, which is a different culture, a different kind of human, and a different kind of technology. And so that all of that kind of gelled, and it's been kind of handy. So I am very interested in how are we going to get from, what would I call it, from the electrical system that we have now to something much different. And it's coming. So I'm excited about this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So let's go ahead and launch this off, Ken, with you kind of describing or sharing with the viewers, what is Moxie Fusion?
Yeah.
How does it work? And Penny, as many questions as you can come up with, because you guys, when Ken starts talking, I love listening to him talk. I get lost in the first 3 sentences.
Okay.
But luckily we have Penny here who understands what Ken's going to be saying. So Ken.
Well, every scientist has their language. You have to get used to that person's language. There's a basic language, but then a scientist often come up with something. Well, and so I'll say, what do you mean by that? You know? Okay.
Okay, well, Moxie Fusion is an acronym. It's I guess, an abbreviation for metal oxygen fusion, but it was kind of a cute name, so I made it Moxie. So anyway, and basically it's just metal fusing with oxygen. The key is oxygen here. That's like it's millions of times easier to fuse something with an oxygen, a metal, or even another oxygen, than it is to do like hydrogen isotope fusion, which is the type of fusion they talk about in the stars and all that, and they try to do in their tokamaks. But so it's a totally new, different type of fusion that's really, well, now it's in the science community, but because I had to kick it in. But before it wasn't there. And basically it's Osawa and Kushi really discovered it back in the late 1950s, early 60s. They put it together, and made it useful. They basically took a sodium street lamp power supply. They basically took a sodium street lamp bulb and they made a special one where they had it was like a ceramic with a little quartz window. And they basically put sodium in there, which, you'd expect in a sodium street lamp, but they put an equal amount of oxygen. And then they also pressurized it with argon. Argon is like a neutral gas. It's called a noble gas. It doesn't react with anything because its inner core, the atomic core is very, very stable. And so that's why it doesn't react with anything. So that's kind of like the moderator. It's like if you want to grind corn, you have to have, a mortar and pestle, to grind the corn. So the argon is kind of like the corn grinder. And then in the case I did, they used sodium and oxygen. And okay, they plugged it in. They basically put a bridge diode in front of the sodium street lamp. So instead of being a AC pulse, it's a DC pulse, right? Direct current pulse. Okay. Pump, pump. And then they plugged their bulb in, and then they ran it, and they could see through the little quartz window. You could see that that yellow orange color that you get with a regular sodium street lamp. But over a couple hours, it changed to purple. And purple is what you get if you take oxygen, and you fuse it, just stick it together. It makes a new atomic nucleus, and that would be potassium. And so it turned a sodium street lamp into a potassium street lamp, and potassium shines in purple. So they started to see the yellow-orange turn into a bright purple, and that proved that they had done fusion. They had fused oxygen with the sodium in the argon moderator and created new element, potassium. And so that was basically their the defining. Of course, it took a decade of work, right, to get to that point, obviously. But that was like the defining clear experiment, which proved their point. And that happened, I think, in 1961 was when they officially released it, or 1960. But obviously, but then it became a threat to industry. And at that time, they were putting in those Westinghouse fission reactors, that run off like the ones that in Fukushima that melted down. Right. They were putting those ones in. And so it was a threat to Westinghouse, and Japan was an occupied country. So basically Osawa and Kushi got crushed, and they continued their research, but it really went nowhere. And if it had actually been promoted and used, we would have had working fusion reactors by the early 1970s. Mm-hmm. And so imagine what that would have been. Working fusion reactors, easy over unity in the 1970s.
Is that what he was after from the beginning, fusion, or was that a happy accident? No,
that's what they were after in the fusion. They had a yin-yang kind of thing, right? Because sodium's on one side of the atomic chart, and that's kind of the yang, and then the yin is on the other part, the oxygen, and they kind of fuse them together and make like a new element. So they came from a yin-yang kind of concept. We call it, in the West, we call it electronegativity. But the key was having that noble gas moderator. And that's also one of the reasons, by the way, I'll announce it here as well. One of the reasons those tokamaks never work is they put they don't work as efficiently as they could is because they try to get hydrogen isotopes like tritium and deuterium to fuse within the reactor. But what they don't understand is that, like, for instance, if we just put heavy water, like the one we did is we took deuterium and oxygen, that's heavy water. It's an isotope you pull out of regular water. Yep. And if we ran that atmosphere in our reactor, we get like almost no reactions. But when we put the moderator of the argon neutral gas in there, it just blazes in the X-ray light, right? So like the tokamaks that people use when they're trying to do fusion, well, in the stars, helium is another noble gas, right? and it's actually the moderator which drives the tritium and the deuterium, or the deuterium to fuse together. And so because they don't include the moderator, which is helium, so if they were in a tokamak with 90% helium and 10% tritium and deuterium, well, then they'd actually get a way, 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 way bigger yield than, but they don't know that. So just letting you know, if any of those tokamak scientists are listening, there's over there, you can increase your yields by 100 times, right? Really simple.
So really what I see when you talk about that is that stable argon adds a frequency that shifts the relationship and forces it into a new formation.
Yes.
So
yeah. Kind of when we crunch the solitons, because we're making like little electric smoke rings, and inside that smoke ring.
Wait! You should say what a soliton is.
Oh, a soliton is a smoke ring of electrons. You've seen a smoke ring, right? People make them.
Yeah.
And so that, like, how can it hold together? Well, it holds together because it's a smoke ring of electrons, but you have to have positive nuclear cores on the inside, right, to hold it all together, because you have you got one spiraling little nuclear cores in the inside, and the outside the electrons spiral the other way. So it's like it's like a smoke ring. You've seen like people make smoke rings, or dolphins make those bubble smoke rings underwater.
So when we were in the lab, we dealt with solitons all the time, but they weren't rings; they were linear. They were.
You can have linear ones, but the smoke rings are especially effective. We use a pulse, so you can make a pulse. If you do it pulse, then when the pulse stops, it kind of makes smoke rings.
Okay, that's how the human heart works.
Yeah, well, maybe
what you're describing. Yeah, you've got, that's how the blood moves through the veins and the arteries. You've got one frequency or one, energy or one direction. Stuff is moving in one direction on the outside of the artery, and then it's moving in the other direction on the inside. It's not really out and in. They're kind of, they interact, and that drives that blood 160 miles an hour.
Yeah. So it's the same principles. It's a different way of because if you just blow your breath, right, it just dissipates, right? But you've seen smoke rings, right? They hold together and they can go like far distances, and they pull a lot of energy.
Yep.
I have this toy. You can buy a toy on YouTube, and it's like it makes these little smoke rings, or little, they're air things, and you spray fake smoke in there, and then you pull it back, and then you can see the smoke ring. But if you don't use the smoke, it'll make these like solitons, and it'll like drive your cat crazy, because they can't see where it's coming from, because it's just air, and they just go, anyway. That's just a fun toy that you can get to kind of drive your cat crazy. But when you put like liquid smoke in there, you spray that smoke in, you can see the solitons. I have that toy here, but it's we don't have time to show it.
Okay, so if how many other scientists do you think know that principle of when you put three things together, you get a reaction between two of them? Is a simplified way of saying it.
It's hundreds. Before it wasn't very many, but now it's hundreds.
Yeah, right.
I did kind of the Stephen Greer method, or the Levengood method, however you want to do it. Instead of like keeping it all secret, I just basically, we published it in ResearchGate and just gave it away. And then I've been promoting it like here and, dozens of other shows. So it's kind of gotten out there. We've got, we're pushing, 9,000 uploads or something. Oh. And then who knows how many papers have been shared with other people. So this cat is out of the bag, the horse has left the barn. It cannot be suppressed like so many others, like Osawa and Kushi did, and so many others. And I will get into some of the others, but it's happening all over the world right now.
Wow.
In lots of science laboratories. So it can't be suppressed. It's basically, either jump on the wagon, or you're left in the dust.
And how many of those people doing that research do you think, maybe an educated guess, really are doing something that would be useful to humanity pretty quick? Not something that we can deal with or, benefit from 70 years from now.
Oh yeah, it won't be 70 years. It could be 2 years. We'd have commercial products out.
Oh wow!
I'll tell you another story. I've given seminars too about this. Got up on the stage, and talk to people about it, and various. I go to a lot of conferences and things. And this, after I was giving one, this guy comes up to me, and some of you maybe remember Stanley Meyer and his water car.
I do. Yes.
Yeah. Well, this guy actually worked with Stanley Meyer.
Oh, wow.
And Stanley,
why don't you pause and just tell the Stanley Meyer story really quickly, because some people may not remember it.
Yeah.
Stanley Meyer was this inventor who basically turned this dune buggy into an over unity engine. I mean, they had like dozens of scientists look at it and study it, and they couldn't figure out how he was doing it. But they did show that it was over unity, because he'd set it all up, he'd get it going, and he'd, you know, there's just a small battery that runs it, and he'd be driving it around for like miles and miles. And the battery, if it was just, he was basically breaking water up into oxygen and hydrogen. Well, that's what he said he was doing. And then he had a neutral gas that was going into it, and it was over unity, right? And scientists looked at it, they couldn't figure it out, but he was very secretive about it. Even on the quote patents he applied for, he never would tell the true secret of what was going on. And so eventually, I guess one day he was trying to make $1 billion or whatever. And so one day he went out to talk to these guys allegedly from NATO at a Cracker Barrel. And during the dinner, he said, listen, I've been poisoned. And he jumps up and runs out and dies in the parking lot. And the two NATO guys disappear, whoever they were. And that was the ignoble end of Stanley Meyer. Now, he had a twin brother that was I think it may be fraternal twins. It was actually an electrical engineer, was kind of the genius behind it, but he wasn't much of a promoter. And eventually he passed away, and then the family was going to sell it to you know, to what the highest bidder, and that's where the whole, you can go online and Stephen Greer talks about that. What happened after that? Do you remember that story?
I don't. No. And I did not know he was poisoned. I just thought he disappeared.
No, he said he was poisoned, and they said it was a cerebral hemorrhage or stroke or whatever what they said, but you know, he's dead in the parking lot. And anyway, but then the rest of the story was Stephen Greer, people not Dr. Stephen Greer, he's kind of like this UFO guy, and he wanted to buy up all of Stanley's stuff and do an open sourced or open research. So like you could actually watch live feeds of them doing all the research and experimentation so that everybody in the world could see it. But he wasn't, they were bidding, right? The family was selling it. So he had to do a bidding war, and he lost the bid because some consortium money from England bought it, got the bid, won the bid, and they had American scientists somewhere in the Midwest. They were doing the research. And then he goes online, and maybe I could send you a link to this stuff where I put it, Jeff Rentz put it together for me. And basically Stephen Greer recalls that he got a call from one of the investors, an American investor, part of that British group though, mostly British group. And the guy was crying because he'd heard from the last scientist. And the guy said he was on the run. All the other scientists were dead, and he was on the run. And then the guy hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks. And you know, he figured he was gone too. This is the story that Stephen Greer says. And that was the end of it. And I guess all the stuff disappeared, and I haven't heard a thing since.
Wow.
So that's all of Stanley Meyer's and all that stuff disappeared. Well, I didn't do that. I immediately published and got online and told lots of people. So, you know, getting rid of me doesn't make a difference because, you know, scientists already have it, right? At least 1,000 people have it. So, you know, that's not a thing. But that's kind of the story. And basically what I was doing here, I'll just kind of put this up here for people to see. I kind of get these little things here. Hopefully we can see that kind of.
Oh, yeah. There it is.
What Osawa and Kushi did on the top, they put sodium with oxygen. They made potassium.
Right.
What we did is we used heavy water. We used deuterium, which is an isotope of hydrogen. It's got one proton and one neutron. We fused it with an oxygen 16, and it made fluorine 18, which then electrocaptured, which pulls an electron and releases a gamma ray, or actually an X-ray, and a bunch of heat energy, and turns into oxygen 18.
Oh my!
And then the bottom on that, I think it's deuterium oxygen 18 turns into a neon 20. So that's the waste that comes out of our product is neon 20, which is a valuable substance in itself. And so we just basically take heavy water, and that's where I'm getting back to the story about it going off and on off the subject. But this goes back to the guy that worked with Stanley Meyer. And Stanley Meyer said, you know, because Stanley Meyer said always use the water from the ocean. Well, water from the ocean is higher in deuterium. So he was hinting at it, what you should do. But, you know, he's a Stanley Meyer being. But when Stanley Meyer ran his car, he used heavy water, deuterium oxide. Okay. And the neutral gas he used, he always told everyone it was a nitrogen. Well, it was actually argon. So Stanley Meyer basically was turning his internal combustion engine thing he built into a Moxie fusion reactor and getting more energy out than in. And so, the only thing he should have done, he should have closed looped the exhaust, because what happened, the guy said, as long as the argon was going through the process, the car was over unity. And when the argon bottle, they used to have a bottle of, it was a natural gas bottle, but it was actually full of argon. He was very sneaky. And when the argon ran out, it stopped being an over unity car. And it went back, and, it stopped, and then eventually the battery drained and would stall out, right? That was the key, was the argon. Now, if he just closed looped the exhaust and run into a condenser, well, the argon could have gone back into the back into the air intake, and then the condensed heavy water could have gone back into the fuel injectors, and you would have a closed loop system, attach an electrical generator on there. Voila, presto, you have an over unity fusion reactor that can power your house.
Oh my.
Or a factory, or the world, as if you build a bunch of them. So that's how very simple it is. I mean, you can do an internal combustion engine, and if you're an HVAC guy and an auto mechanic, could basically make over unity fusion reactors.
Wow.
Well, let's talk about that, Ken. I am sure you've thought about this for years. How do we take what you have developed and make it available in a way that's affordable and easy to adapt?
Well, we probably have to get some foreign manufacturers, which is actually probably happening right now. Kind of tell you what happened. Like we did, the early research was done like in 2008. And then we did like third-party verification. We actually used two TSA systems, Transportation Security Administration Systems. It's actually a company, and it makes like the radiation detectors for the TSA.
Oh.
It's up Highway 20 here by Firestone. And on the weekends, we knew guy Tim, he worked there. So we go in with our Moxie reactor, which ran off a couple of batteries, right? We didn't even plug it on the wall, a couple batteries, a small unit. Of course, it puts out a blaze of X-rays, so you have to be very careful to stay away from it. Get a distance and stuff before you. We used a 50-channel silver iodine radiation detector. So from like 0 to like 2.5 million electron volts, it split up all the radiation into 50 channels, so we could actually see it. We changed out electrodes and did all kinds of stuff. So we have like billions of bits of. We have like a huge database that we did all this research in, which has never been released. So. But that's our third-party confirmation, and but then we published it all. I published the process of Moxie Fusion on ResearchGate back in 2014, I think, and right after we did do a patent. It eventually got rejected. There's another one, but in the meantime, because we published it on ResearchGate, there was a group called this. I'm just putting it up there. You can see it.
Yep.
It's called Experiments Demonstrating the Creation of Elements versus Pulsed Electric Field in Water and Deteriorated Water Applications to the Production of Fluorine. They're basically doing what we did, right? And they also put a patent, but they abandoned it. And basically, they just confirmed what we did. They just redid what we did, and confirmed it. And that was, I think they published that in ResearchGate in like 2020, 2021. So they probably did the research in like 2019. They just basically redid what we did. It was the Scotia Group and the University of Valencia. So they did that. And then, just to tell you where it's gone, I've been working pretty hard on the last couple of years. We got a new patent application in and all that kind of stuff. And this was published in. I'm just gonna leave it up there. People can look at it. You can redo your thing. But basically, it's water can trigger nuclear reactions to produce energy in isotope gases. In Julian or Dr. Hong, that's his name. Sorry, I tried some of these other names, and there's like another 10 guys here from Taiwan. Basically presented this at the ICCF 26. That's like the LENR Cold Fusion Conference they did in Japan last year. Oh, by next year it's going to be in Toronto, Canada, I think.
Oh,
something. So everybody can go if you're in North America. Well, maybe not everybody, but it's a lot easier than going to Japan. And so they basically published into scientific reports. It's part of Nature. I don't know if people ever heard about Nature. Is a prominent British scientific magazines, and they have like Nature's the headliner, and Scientific Reports is kind of like their weekly. They put out with interesting new data, right? So it's like the B line of Nature, but it's in Nature. And then that drove it. You can go look at this. In early July, CERN actually did Moxie Fusion, because this has been going on in Europe for the last couple of years. And then these guys published the paper. And finally, it's made such a tizzy in the physics world, they have to come up with an explanation of why it's working, right? Because if, some kids in the high school auto lab could do it, or practically anybody else, and it's easy to do, well, then you have to come up with an explanation, because it's kind of embarrassing if you're physics and you don't know what's going on with it. So they finally dragged it off, and they did a special run at CERN, which is, you probably heard of. CERN's like the top temple of science. And it was early July. You can go online and look it up. And basically what they did is they took what these guys did is they were basically using somnoluminescence. They're collapsing little bubbles in water, and they were fusing oxygen 16 with the hydrogen to make oxygen 17. And then oxygen 17 was fusing with another oxygen 17 to make a carbon, and which came out as carbon dioxide and neon 22.
Okay, wait a second. Hold on. It might be helpful to just take a second here to help people understand that when you have a particle, or you have a molecule, or you have an atom, or you have a couple of atoms, when you change anything about that atom, you get if you add an electron, if you take away an electron, whatever you do, you get a different set of characteristics. And we have, up until I think the last 20 years, we really didn't, the population, I don't think, understood what an isotope was, and how you could get different characteristics out of oxygen, because when you add different stuff to the oxygen, it changes the characteristics, it changes the function, it changes the shape, it changes the energetic factors, and all of the effects that you get from that oxygen. So the richness of particles and playing with particles is something that I think it would be helpful for people to understand. And so when you talk about, oxygen 18 or oxygen 17 or 16, that what you're really saying is each time you change that number, you change the characteristics of that oxygen.
Oh yeah, when I take like oxygen 16, it means it has 8 protons and 8 neutrons.
Right.
And then what these guys, Dr. Hong and his colleagues were doing is they basically were putting a proton in there, and that turns it into fluorine 817, which then EC captures to oxygen 17. And that releases energy, because when you squeeze it together to make a new thing, a little bit of energy comes out.
That's
and you can use that energy to like boil water, run a steam turbine, and make electricity. So
and we also found that when you put different things together, if they're not compatible, they create a third energy field. You got the energy field of this one and the energy field of this one. It creates a third energy field, and that energy field ends up developing solitons that pack together, that then produce particles of their own, and you get something else entirely different.
Oh yeah, well that's actually what they were doing. These, when somnoluminescence, these little bubbles collapse.
Yeah.
They basically collapse into solitons.
Oh wow.
Itty solitons, and then inside that soliton you get the fusion. So that's basically, it was the same process we were doing, just a different method of producing the solitons. But we were just using electrical pulses. They're using sound pulses basically. But the end result is because is solitons that make fusion. And so their fusion method is 1/10,000th or 100,000th as efficient as ours, as the Moxie process or Osawa and Kushi's, but it doesn't matter. It's happening, right? And these guys also all know me now, because I talked to them. I gave them all the Moxie Fusion stuff, so they're all running that, and they're going wild in Taiwan with it. They'll probably come out with generators, because they didn't know about the noble gas moderator, which drives the process. 100,000.
Okay, I have another question. Excuse me for interrupting. So can you take that? You just said, you have this pulse electricity. I think that's what you said. Yeah. The heart is a pulsed electrical thing as well. We have this pulsed energy moving through us. What we found in the lab was that all of those particles respond to consciousness, all of them. And so when you have to try to bring what you're doing back to the human body for people that say, well, how do I make this useful to me? When you have that kind of pulsation happening in you, and you have some breath going on, which is your oxygen, and then you have this consciousness, in which you are envisioning this or feeling that or imagining something with great intensity, you get that same sort of transformation, I guess I'll call it, of energetic effects, and you produce different kinds of tissues in yourself, or tissues with different qualities and strengths and functions. And so I think, you know, where this research that Ken is talking about is going is to a deeper understanding of the nature of reality, not only of ourselves, but of the greater, the world that we live in. So, and I have some more questions, but keep going.
So the basic answer to this is you basically can turn water into, you know, you can turn a gallon of water into like 100 gallons of gasoline energy equivalent.
Right.
And especially ocean water, because it's got a lot of deuterium. And
Yeah.
it's basically, you know, how many gallons of, and you know, you're only using like a tiny fraction of the water, like, you know, 1/7,000th or 1/6,000th of it to get 100 gallons of energy out of it. And, you know, the oceans are virtually endless. So, yeah.
I know.
So there's an endless supply of energy. Well, I mean, not endless, but virtually endless supply.
Pretty much.
You know, now I know it's happening in Taiwan, likely happening in Japan, of course, you know, maybe in Korea, but since the and then the communist Chinese, because they got spies everywhere, they're already doing it too. So you know, so you know, basically East Asia is on top of this and is moving it forward.
Okay.
And Europe obviously knows about it too. They've been doing it for much longer, in the research labs. Because one of the other things you can do is you can fuse oxygen with metals. Like there's in my paper, all you have to do is go Moxie Fusion ResearchGate, and you can get my paper. But there's like a Yorio and Krilio. We're basically taking tungsten oxide in electrolysis, pulsed electrolysis process, and they were producing, basically tungsten has four isotopes. Isotopes are like elements have like, you call them by the number of protons they have.
Right.
It tells you what elements you have, but often they have different levels of neutrons. So I think tungsten has four main isotopes. That means they have the same number of protons, but four different levels of neutrons. And when you fuse that with an oxygen 16, it makes, it made like 5 different types of metals, which I'll tell you how that happened. So one of the metals was rhenium. Another was iridium. It also made gold. And it also made thulium. You took oxygen and you fused it with a certain isotope of tungsten, it actually blows up. And thulium is one byproduct. Beryllium-9 is another side product. And there's some carbons and oxygens and heliums flying out. You know, we call them double alpha decays or single alpha decays flying off the outside. But so basically, and so you can basically fuse any element you want for like under a couple $100 an ounce.
Right.
You can make gold for a couple $1 an ounce, or platinum or palladium. It doesn't matter. It can be done. And, you know, Yorio and Krilio were doing it in 2004. They didn't really quite understand the process, but it doesn't matter. They were doing it. And there's like, I have 7 examples of different people. I mean, you remember the Fleischmann and Pons? Those guys, they were actually doing Moxie type fusion. They thought deuterium in the platinum lattice was fusing into helium. What was actually happening was the palladium lattice, depending on which one they were using that day. What's happening is the oxygen was fusing with the platinum, which turned it into radon. And we know what radon does. And then they were venting that into the atmosphere of the laboratory. And they were breathing that radon gas. So they were in like, that's why it's the late Dr. Fleischmann.
Yeah. Oh my.
It was like hundreds of times worse than your worst radon basement. And then what would happen is the radon breaks down into other substances and releases a alpha particle, which is just a really fast helium nucleus.
Yeah.
And that's where the helium-4 was coming from. And by the way, they're also making a bunch of X-rays, because X-rays that's what we found. And that's why there was a lot of late doctors and dead PhDs. This research is because they were thinking it would come out in the gamma rays. And that's like in, you know, 500,000 to millions of electron volts. That's like the energy that the energy comes out at. Well, actually what happened, it lowers the Coulomb barrier, the thing it gets to fuse things together. So it came out in the X-ray bands. So they were walking around in the laboratory with these Geiger counters looking for gamma rays, and all the time they were baking themselves with X-rays.
X-ray.
Because a Geiger counter cannot detect X-rays, which are lower energy level. And so those two things is why there was a lot of late professors and dead PhDs associated with this research. Oops.
Okay. Yeah.
They basically Madame Curried themselves.
I was just going to say, there's been a whole, 3 generations of scientists that have died playing with X-rays.
Oh yeah, yeah. When radioactivity was discovered, they just with the uranium.
Yeah.
They
we got this magic tool. Yeah.
They used to make radon toothpaste and stuff. That didn't end up very well for people that used it. But that was what they knew back then, and of course they learned a little bit since then. Well, we thought we did, but it was the same with metal oxygen fusion. They didn't really know what they were doing, and so there were unfortunate consequences for people that really didn't understand what was going on.
Well, let me ask a couple of questions. Do you see? No, let me not say that. When you look at this whole process of Moxie fusion, and I'm just going to say, from where I sit, it looks and sounds like that is the beginning stages of being able to create whatever elements we want and need.
Yep.
So how much sense do you think that would help in the future, avoiding things like the war in Ukraine? Because we don't need Russia's resources. We can produce any resources that we want.
Oh, anybody can do it, like any nation. Switzerland could produce all the energy at once and all the piles of gold that they could possibly want. Well, the problem is, of course, then gold won't be that valuable, but they can do it if they want. They can do all the
but gold is valuable for other reasons.
Oh, yes, it is. It's useful in quantum systems. It have to use them in quantum.
Well, and it's useful in consciousness.
Yes. So. And so it's, but it just depends. It's like a recipe, right?
Yes.
So the Moxie fusion is the oven, and then you just throw in the recipe and pop, out comes it. But because like one of the things it made, it makes beryllium, because when it breaks up, the thulium comes out. Beryllium is like, it's a useful metal, but it's also highly toxic.
I know.
One of the other things was osmium. It made osmium. That's kind of in the platinum group metals. But osmium tetroxide, that's 4 oxygens combined with that osmium. It's a really toxic combination.
Is it? I don't know much about osmium.
Osmium tetroxide is it's like as nastier than mercury hydroxide getting in your body. So you got to know what you're doing, right? You can't just be out there, playing around with this stuff, because you could be making, besides the X-rays, you could be making some nasty combinations. So you kind of have to have some competency, and you just don't go crazy on it. There's some pathways that are safe, and there's pathways, you can have problems.
Yeah. So do you think that we, just make a wild guess, maybe I shouldn't ask that, but the question was, do you think we could begin to discover other forms of material? The material sciences would expand greatly because, or would we be getting into other dimensional characteristics that aren't useful in the 3rd dimension?
Well, you can make pure isotopic metals. So like tungsten has 4 isotopes.
Yeah.
And each actually, and the same with like every metal. Most metals have like 3 or 4 or 6 isotopes, right?
Okay.
Gold is the only one that only has 1 isotope. It's 197, 79 protons, and 197 total atomic weight, whatever neutrons that is. I can do the math right now. But so it's all gold is monoisotopic. That's why you use it in quantum circuits. Because let's say aluminum is the only other metal that really is monoatomic. So if I use copper thing's got like 4 or 5 isotopes. Well, the 4 or 5 isotopes interfere with the quantum waves, because it's got 4 or 5 waves now. So you want to make your quantum device out of like gold, a monoisotopic metal. But with Moxie fusion, you can produce a lot of the downstream metal productions are monoisotopic.
Right.
So they only have 1 isotope. So I could take forever to get a monoisotope. You take a metal and then try to separate the isotopes. That's really, really, really difficult. But if you can make the metal monoisotopically, that's so much easier. And a monoisotope, like they do it in lead. Lead is a common one. They pay like 10 times for lead out of Roman shipwrecks than they do for lead out of lead mines, because the Roman lead came out of a deposit which had a lot of radioactivity in it. And it's all cooled down, the Roman lead, because it's been sitting as pure lead for 2,000 years in the seafloor, right? Or wherever.
Right.
So you can use that. You use that for shielding for sensitive radiation detectors, because it's no longer radioactive. The radioactivity in that new lead I take out of a mine is gone with this old lead. And that's basically like a monoatomic type of lead, and it's 10 times as valuable as like the regular lead. And so you'll be able to produce all these monoatomic. And so instead of having 70 or 80 metals, we now have, 240 or something.
Wow.
I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
But that allows us to do, it'd be like a second industrial revolution when all of those different monoisotopic metals are applied to various, technologies. I couldn't even imagine what they could be, but somebody will discover them and use them for something.
Right now, oh, go ahead, Kim.
You go first, and then I have a question for the both of you.
Oh, okay. So I am reading a paper right now by Federico Fagin, and he's got an Italian scientist that he's working with. They have come up with this theory that really makes a lot of sense. And the theory is that the quantum realm is really the realm of multidimensional existence. Something can be, you know how when we talk about quantum, we say, well, it can be on, or it can be off, it can be a 1, or it can be a 0, or it can be something else. And what they're saying is the number of positions, superpositions, are unlimited. And that gets into other dimensional states. And it sounds like you're messing around on the edge of that multidimensionality that we are hopefully moving toward in such a way that when we create, and this is probably going to sound way out there, but where I come from, this is how things are. You create your material things to be far less dense and far more conscious, because different combinations of metals have different kinds of consciousness, different responsiveness levels. And so when you ask something to do a certain thing, it will do it, because it's not as thick, as heavy, as densely packed, as as rigid as what we have here. And so I just want to say, wow, I think you are playing around with the actual, what I call it, you're right there in that whole realm of what else can we create and how can we play with these different isotopes. And when you start wandering into other dimensions, you get different characteristics that will work together, that won't work together here unless they have a moderator. And so we're right on the cusp of all of that. And so as you're talking, my wheels are turning.
Yeah, it's providing the the building blocks, the Legos.
Yes,
to build something better.
And I have for years been frustrated with scientists. Here's the theory. Where's the engineer? Where's the guy who can say, okay, what can we do with this and build it and make it work? And maybe it's not beautiful, and maybe it's kind of kludgy, but it works. And then you just keep refining it. And so I think that's wonderful. So in terms of that whole quantum realm, I thought that was the most useless realm. It's like, that's a dead end. It's not going anywhere. But now Federico is saying, I think it is. Quantum is, we just haven't known enough to be able to say, what do we do? How do we know? What can we do with this? So I'm not done with the paper yet, but it's really very interesting. So
here's my question for the both of you. When I have listened to Ken, on my conversations with him and others, he talks about over parity energy. When I talk with Penny about the free energy concept, which I'm all over because I feel like it would change so much, Penny talks about it as plasma energy. Can one or both of you kind of articulate or describe or share what's the difference between what Ken is talking about and what Penny's talking about, and are they the same thing?
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. We just use plasma to get from point A to point B. We get, solid stuff. We put it in a plasma, which allows us to fuse it and make product B.
Right. A plasma is just a region of frequencies or currents and fields that produce particles that stick together or work together. So when you add some sort of moderator or you add another thing, they interact just like people do. You put, 2 dogs or 3 dogs together, they interact. 3 people together, 4 or 5, they interact. And so particles do the same thing. And a plasma is just a region of particles that work together.
Oh, Penny, you've talked about over the years that plasma really responds to consciousness.
Oh, it does, immediately. And if you can do what Ken is talking about doing, which is produce materials that have a different characteristic function or maybe different density in terms of, not quite so tightly packed. When you watch what happens in a nano field, all the particles separate a little bit without losing their connection. They still stay magnetically, I guess would be the term, responsive to one another, but they're much more, it's like a basket weave that goes from very tight weave to much more open, kind of like a sieve. And so that's maybe a good analogy for nano. But plasma, everything is made of plasma, and it all responds to consciousness. And if we can have materials that have a little more responsiveness, a little less density and weight, but more strength, then we can begin to move toward materials that might respond to us in a way that some of the materials that I'm familiar with respond.
Okay, so are you saying that the more dense a material is, the less mobility based on the consciousness, and the more, even though it's still in relation, there's more space, and that's going to respond to consciousness?
Yes, it all responds to consciousness. But if you don't have, like if you can't see the lights around a human body or around a material, you can't see if it's it almost always responds. But some of the heavier materials are not very responsive. The consciousness of a stone is not very active. The consciousness of a plant is much more active, and the consciousness of a human is all over the place, and very, very curious, and always putting stuff together, and always reacting. That's how humans are. And then we react in our world. So we're moving toward becoming beings that are less dense, less heavy.
Yeah.
And that will give us a quality of multidimensional existence, multidimensionality.
Well, it'll broaden our abilities.
Yeah. And when you have stuff, like if you had a handful of dust and you went and you blew that dust, that's all the force you need to move that dust. If you have something that, it's little blocks of lead and you go, and it's not going anywhere. Okay, so when it depends on how tightly packed and how heavy and how rigid, and the energies. Sometimes the energies, let's use lead or something, for example, those energies lock in place with the surrounding energies that hold them in that position. So yeah, it's we're moving toward a whole new world and a whole new way of seeing our world, and how that is going to manifest. It manifests in a mind that's much more powerful, in materials that are much more powerful, much more versatile, much more responsive to consciousness, and all of that is to our benefit down the road.
Yeah. So next, I'd like to move into the application of Ken's work, and then I'd like to move to Penny, because Penny, you have experience with civilizations that have free energy. And I really want to get into the dramatic changes that we would have in our lives for the better. So Ken, with with what you have, can you in a kindergarten level take us from your work to what it would take to apply it, let's say, to a car or to a household? Do we need high technology engineers, or is this something that Bob down at the, auto repair could put together?
Conceivably, it's something Bob down at auto repair could put together, or at least manufacture. I mean, obviously, the bigger you can make more sophisticated, larger projects, which would have higher efficiencies. But I mean, if the Stanley Meyer thing turns out to be what it looks like it is, and in my Moxie paper, just go Moxie Fusion ResearchGate. I mean, I give 7 examples of people doing it, right?
Oh.
Okay, way before, I was even born, people were doing this, right? So it's not like my technology. I'm just pointing out, which is a common thing, right? That other people have been doing. They just, it's kind of like all these blind guys with the elephant. This one's the trunk, this one's whatever.
That's perfect.
Elephant. It's just like 7 blind guys with a big elephant there. But it's something that can be done. And, I threw Stanley Meyer in, and there's a few others. I've given, you could go out online and find stuff I've talked about. More people, because I could put I didn't put Stanley Meyer, obviously, or David Hudson or any of these other people into, the paper, because I didn't want to, contaminate it with, I wanted strict scientific people, PhDs and other kind of guys that doing straight science research. But there's a lot of these side guys that have done similar things, and, they're not, they're a little wacky. They got their things, but they're just doing the same process. They just discovered it. So, I mean, this thing should have been happening, decades ago, right? Because we could have had working fusion reactors of all different sizes, early 1970s. You could buy one to run your house, right, or your business, or a factory. There wasn't, you don't need petroleum, and you don't have to have wars over petroleum. You don't have to worry about strategic metals. I mean, it's like one of the things they're talking about. These they're fighting over their big thing about, rare earth metals. Well, you can just synthesize it from lower stuff,
That's right.
So have you thought about mass producing this technology, Ken? Have you gone down that road in your thinking?
Oh, yeah, I could do it, but it's hard to make. I mean, just building our own research lab was such a thing, because America has such regulations and difficulties and greedy parasites on different levels. And so it's just really difficult. Now, all I know it's happening in Asia, because, the Chinese and Japan and Taiwan and Korea, that's happening there because they aren't filled with such constraints, right? If there's something that they can do and make a commercial product, they're going to go for it. They're not held by constraints. See, a lot of things in the West, if does it have a PhD? Has it come from the right source? Is it, is it politically correct to do it, right? So they have this whole giant constraints before anything can happen, and usually there's a big argument, and it won't happen because they'll need to have another meeting, right? And forever, right? Sorry, deal that way. Oh, here's a technology, we can turn it into something. Bam, let's do it, and then it happens.
Yeah. Wow.
All right, that's interesting. So we're probably going to see, what would we call it? Would we call it equipment or a machine or a device? What would we?
Yeah.
Well,
how do you envision that getting dispersed, going to scale?
Well, I expect that they'll just like cars, right? They'll just make them by the millions and export them to all the world. You want a Moxie fusion reactor? Well, you buy it from Japan, you buy it from China, you buy it from Korea, you buy it from
Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. You just buy it on Amazon and it'll ship to you, but it just won't be built in the U.S. because the myriad of problems that exist here to make businesses and do all that stuff. I'm sure Trump and his people are trying to make it better, but there's some really fundamentals that can't be fixed. So it'll just be made in Asia, and you can import it, right? Put factories over here and build them here, right? They'll send the parts from Asia, they'll build them in the United States, and then you can buy your American-built Moxie fusion reactor, right? So it's just like that. It'll be like a car or anything else. You just buy it and install it. You install it outside on a pad or in a hole in the ground with a concrete slug over it so the X-rays don't get out, and turn it on, and away you go. Now you got electrical power when you need it. You don't have to worry if the sun's shining or not or the wind's blowing. You just turn it on like a car and it just runs.
Okay, Ken, are you running your house on this?
Oh, no, I could do that. Well, it's got a bunch of X-rays. I mean, I could, I suppose, but I got to a certain level and I've shown all the things, and it's time that and it is happening now. I know it's happening in Taiwan, probably Japan and Korea too, China, most likely. It's happening there, right? They're pushing for the commercial products now, not just the R&D, because they kind of figured some of that out, or other people have. And so it's going to happen. and then you're gonna have to buy it from them. I mean, sorry, that's the way the world works. If you're sitting around having a meeting and arguing whether it's real or not, other people don't have that problem. They can do the research, they can get the results, they can realize it's real, and then they can turn it into commercial applications. And so you just buy it you'll buy it on Amazon imported from overseas.
I have to say that when I've looked at the future, everybody has their own little generating plant. When you buy a house, you bring your own power source to that house. And when you move, you sell the house, you take that power source with you. It's like your washer, or your dryer, or your refrigerator, or your stove.
Yeah.
It belongs to you.
Yeah, and that's not the only way to make energy, right? There's some people call.
But I've seen that as a stage.
Yeah. But this is one that does work and is being applied, and it's going to happen no matter what, right? Doesn't matter. It's already the cat's out of the bag. The horse has left the barn.
Yeah.
It's and if you can't stop it.
Penny, from your deep dive that you've done into the systems that are breaking down and the new ones that will be built up as a result, can you kind of give us a sense of how is it going to impact us as a country, as a world? What big changes are we going to be seeing?
Well, there's a period of time where things looks like they don't work very well. And there's a lot of wonderful mavericks out there saying, I can do this. And so there's a mishmash of all sorts of power supplies and sources for a while, but it eventually gels. It actually becomes, it's a whole different system. It's more like what Ken is talking about. It's the use of a few materials put together that then are held together with surrounding fields. And those surrounding fields also act as the insulation that blocks the X-ray or whatever frequencies are coming off of that. That might be not healthy for plants and animals and other living things. So we learn how to use frequency like masters. And that
humans do?
Humans do. Not every human. The people like Ken learn how to do that sort of thing. And it gets engineered. And then people, you have to, I got a letter from somebody at one point when I first started talking about physics and plasma and all that. And she wrote, she was very upset. You mean I have to understand all this science crap now? And I wrote back and said, yeah, you do. If you don't understand the new energy, you won't be able to function in the new world. And we've had such bad education for the last 50 years that people don't even understand how this world works. And so I'm concerned. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. It's like Legos.
Homework.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys, it's like Legos, right?
Right.
This is probably something people should be interested in.
I agree. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, the nature of the atom, the introduction to the structured atom model. And, most physicists like today, they have this belief that I'll give you like a little history lesson here. But kind of easy. Before, when they first thought of these things called atoms, they thought they were like raisin bread. Like the electrons and the protons were kind of like nuts or fruitcakes or whatever, kind of baked in. And then this guy Rutherford came along, and he realized, from some experiments that there was like these electrons. They were going around on the outside, and the very, very tiny, in the very center of the atom, there's this thing called a nucleus. Yeah. But even up today, most physicists believe it's like a bunch of red and blue M&Ms that you just throw in a bowl and they're just kind of sitting there. Well, that's not true. It actually has a structure, and that's what this nature of the atom, an introduction to the structured atom model, and it's basically by the main guy was Ido Kohl, but he's got 4 guys that he worked with, right, that put it all together. And, the Sorensen, Otte, and Emming, I met at least one of those guys. I met 2 of them, I guess, of the whole thing. But basically, if you put Legos together, you can put together an atomic nucleus. Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you can, there's the rules, and you just kind of stick it together. And once you stick it together, then you kind of understand it. And it's really, if you can do Legos, you can probably understand how the atomic nucleus works. It'll take a while, but to make different Lego critters, but you can do it. I mean, kids can do it, so you can do it, and it's really not that more. It's going to take time and a little bit of tedium, to learn it, but it's doable and understandable.
Yeah,
I had heard from somewhere, and I can't remember now. It might have been Stephen Greer. Said whoever it was said that when the American people, or when people around the globe realize that 40% of every dollar is to cover energy costs, it will hit home to them how fleeced we've been.
Oh, but you forgot one thing. The other 50 cents of that dollar goes to interest.
Oh, great.
That's true. That's true. That's correct.
Oh, yeah.
So the wealth that we would experience as a planet could be extraordinary.
Yes, I mean, basically, most people really, if you look at the effort you put in and taxes and interest and all this other stuff, you only get like 5% of what you actually work for.
That's right.
Literally. So imagine you could work 5% of what you're doing now and have just as much money, right?
Yeah.
So imagine you just worked a regular job. Well, you'd be, because back in the 60s, the average wage was $100,000 a year.
Wow.
Okay, in today's terms, right? So every worker, the average guy, right? The hamburger flipper was making $100,000 a year in equivalent money. Okay, people don't seem to understand that because they have inflation and all that. So somebody had a really good job. He's making $300,000-$400,000, and that was like 25-30% of the population, and the people above that. So that was the prosperity back in the 60s. That's why one guy could work, and the wife could stay home, raise the kids, because society, the money wasn't being siphoned off so much by the banksters and the taxers and all the energy bloodsuckers and all those other people. But today we've kind of gotten into a hole, and people don't really understand that because it's like the boiling frog. They slowly turn the heat up until the frog boils.
And I think right there is a really good reason why we should all just sit down.
Oh, I agree.
We should all just sit down and we're not moving.
Yep.
Until things change dramatically. Yeah, that's such a good point, Ken. Thank you. So Penny, having been in a civilization, and
that's different.
Can you just hit the highlights of what it looks like we're going to be moving into? Hopefully.
Well, I don't know about whether we will be able to duplicate or match what people from other places are already doing. But I can say a few things about how they live and something about how they produce energy. And so when you, and I don't understand all of the details of this because I remember seeing these things, but I'm here now, and you lose a lot when you come here. So there are these tubes, and they have some sort of metallic liquid in them. And underneath them, they have a plate of another kind of liquid. And then there's a field, the magnetic field that moves back and forth. And that thing generates enough energy to power a ship.
Yeah, we have a up here at the area. We have a Dr. Garrett Modell. He's out of the University of Boulder, emeritus, and he actually has like what you call 0-point energy devices.
Okay.
Like solar panels, 0-point solar panels, but you could put them in your basement and they still generate energy. So Garrett Modell already has, your 0 point. I mean, it's low density, but you just make it bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's right up the street, right? Literally, he's right up the street. I know him. And you got your 0-point solar panels, right? He's making them right now at the lab. And so it's not, you just don't need Moxie to do this. I mean, there's go talk to Garrett Modell, and they're big, they'd be big, but they'd still do the job. So
well, Moxie is gonna, I can see Moxie being used to produce or to experiment with techniques that produce whatever mineral or whatever thing on the periodic table we want to produce, whatever we need. And that's where we're headed, so that we don't have to be stealing from our neighbor or fighting over resources that are in the earth or the whole space, all of space is full of energies, frequencies. And those are the frequencies that we will eventually use to produce whatever energy we need, because frequency produces particles. And we just haven't gotten to the point where that really has sunk in. How do you manipulate? And when you watch those frequencies interact, and they start, first you see this whitish stuff that begins to form in space and where the fields are interacting. And then you see these spots of light, these little particles of light flash. They're like photons that flash. You can see photons in the air if you adjust your eyes correctly. But those then compress and you get metal. It solidifies, it condenses into matter. And we are just now on the cusp of starting to experiment with that kind of thing. And consciousness is a factor in that. So that's a big thing as well. So we're on our way, I think.
I want to interject something to kind of back up a little bit.
Okay.
In my personal opinion, whatever we're talking about, there are powers within the governments around the planet that know this and more. And I think that they just don't want this to come out because their excuse for war will no longer be valid.
Oh, yeah.
Because if they can act stupid about all this energy that we could create for essentially free, then how are they going to convince us to go fight in Russia? They need the lie to continue with the fighting and the wars.
Well, why do they want to fight in Russia? Because they're greedy. They're greedy.
I think they want to fight in Russia because they want that energy.
They do. They want the resources. They want the money. But those people, their consciousness is pretty low. It isn't really. I mean, there are people within the government who are really amazing people. I have to say, there are some, but they are isolated.
Who did you say that those people, their energy is low? Who are you referring to? Some people in the government, or
a lot of politicians, a lot of people that are working as leaders. The leadership of the world has been corrupted pretty seriously, and we have to get past that. So we have to outlast them. You know what they say about what was that joke about old scientists? Ken, do you remember? Old scientists die and they grind them up and feed them to the next.
Science moves forward one funeral at a time.
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
yeah,
you deserve a gold star for surviving.
I agree.
I didn't come up with most of this stuff. I can tell the difference between broken glass and a raw diamond.
Well,
so
yeah.
It's just lying around. All this stuff is lying around. I mean, Moxie Fusion, you can go up, you can get Garrett Medell's, 0-point solar panels, they work forever, right? And so it just doesn't, there's all of these things are out there. It's not the only, I'm just saying I'm one. There's another guy down the street, and there's 4 or 5 others around that have other methods. And so
you have to be willing to speak.
Well, I speak.
Yeah.
Garrett speaks too, but nobody listens much. So.
Well, yeah, people do listen, but a lot of people have a hard time because they don't understand the language of science. And that's something that really needs to be corrected so that we can move forward as a group. So,
and I think you make a good point, Penny, because, and I confessed to this before we even came on. I don't understand what Ken talks about. I mean, I understand very little because I just don't, and it's scary when you don't understand something or it feels intimidating.
I don't understand bookkeeping, and I have that same feeling when it comes to QuickBooks. So yeah, I know just how you feel.
Yeah, it feels scary. It feels intimidating. It feels overwhelming. But when I listen to Ken, it feels, I get it. The energy I get from him is just like really good, really reasonable. It's exciting. But to say I understand the content, I don't, because I wasn't exposed to the information. What are you holding up?
Just a soft one. I don't really, I kind of understand how this works.
There you go.
But only in the most primitive sense. I know electronics and all that, but here it is. But I don't need to know how it works to use it.
Use
right?
it.
It's the
Right.
same with a car. There's probably all kinds of things in a car, the gearing and the transmission and the cams and all that, and the engine. But you don't need to know all that, because we can all drive a car, right? We all use the cell phone, the computer. So, and it's just another piece of technology, and you just press the button to turn it on, and away it goes. And
There
if
you
you want to
go.
learn a little bit more, you can read the manual. It's pretty much that simple.
So I guess the next thing we need to look forward to is, Bob down at the repair shop, knowing how to convert our cars so we don't have to pay $5 a gallon.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll just there'll be it's just like a used car lot. There'll be the Moxie Fusion generator. You go down there, you look at the model you want. Some guys techs come out, put it in, plug in your house, and away you go. You just
Plug in your
water
house.
basically and some argon. The air is 0.9% water. The air is 0.9% argon. Okay, and water, deuterium, it's everywhere, right? Water, we all have water. So you got water, you got air, bam, you got an energy. It's that simple, and it's been around since before I was born. The technology was pretty much there. So it's just been suppressed, and for various reasons, and it's probably time it came out.
And you were mentioning helium at the beginning of our talk as a
it's a moderator for
it is
fusion reaction.
The whole thing.
Yeah, that's what the sun has, a bunch of helium in it. That's what drives. That's the moderator which drives the fusion reactions inside the sun.
That's right.
Like if the fusion guys could ever figure that out and put helium in along with their deuterium and tritium, well, they get all kinds of better deals. But
that's right.
That's like talking to a wall. So it's not the first time.
Don't give up. Don't give up.
I feel like we're this close.
I think we are. We're at a tipping point in terms of science, an even bigger tipping point in terms of technology, because they aren't always on the same page, even though they often appear to be. But we're working our way past some leadership that has just been a disaster. And if we had a different kind of leadership, we could have all kinds of different education, different kinds of healing tools, different kinds of development, human development. We can't move forward if we can't reverse the arrested development that everybody is struggling with.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, I have taken so much of your time, you guys. I appreciate both of you. This conversation, I was so excited to listen to both of you. Ken, do you have any final thoughts before we close out?
Oh, not really. I mean, I pretty much said what there is. I mean, it's not a technological problem. It's a moral and spiritual problem.
Bingo.
That we're dealing with here, and that's maybe not a solution I'm the most qualified to talk about, let us say.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Penny?
I would just echo what he just said. It's a moral and spiritual problem. We're blocked, and we're blocking ourselves. That's the problem. We don't know what we don't know. And so it's really important to have conversations like this. You look at your response. Kimberly, you said, when I hear Ken talk, I get hopeful, I get excited. The energy of what he's saying, even though you don't understand all the little technical details and all the language, there's something in you that says there's hope there. And I think that's where we need to keep going, in that direction, where there's hope. Yeah.
Wonderful. Ken, you're a beacon of hope.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Go out and talk to your friends about this, because the more energy we can put behind this type of change and movement, the faster we're going to get there. So let's make sure that we hold on to this. We keep the conversation going. Share this video just so, I would like to see people get a little, stomp on their little feet and saying, enough. We want something different. All right. Thank you, Penny, for joining us. Ken, thank you so much. And, and thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. All right.
Thank you, everyone. Take care of yourselves.
Bye.